if you're in a low trust environment or culture, you can measure your words as carefully as you want, and somebody's still going to misinterpret.
Excited for this conversation today. Have Bruce Brown from Proactive Coaching with me. And Bruce and I have never met or talked till today, but I've been aware of his work and read some of his books over the last 20 years. So I'm just excited for the conversation and to learn from you. So Bruce, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Coach. It's really an honor to be with you.
Yeah, great. So let's start out. Just tell us a little bit, give us the background of your career. And then, the listeners are coaches and athletic leaders looking to work better with this generation of athletes. So kind of background, and then why should these folks care what you have to say?
I'm not sure why they should care about anything I have to say. I have 5 daughters, and I think they're always surprised when anybody listens to me. So
I have 2. That's true in my life.
So teacher and a coach for 32 years, athletic administrator. Knew that's what I wanted to do when I was really young. I had some great mentors within my family and close to me that made me to think when I grew up, that's who I want to be. I actually started coaching, Bob, when I was 13. And I was helping with a Little League team, and there were 12-year-olds, and I was 13. And then the next year, now I'm talking about a long time ago, so you wouldn't see this today. But when I was 14, they gave me a team of my own. So it was like, okay, this is pretty great. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. Went to Washington State University as a great preparation in physical education and in education in general. Like I said, my wife and I both taught and coached for our entire careers, coached football, basketball, baseball, volleyball, badminton. She coached track and gymnastics. We love that profession. I have been an administrator. I've been coaching the junior high, at the high school, and the community college and the college level. Worked in the scouting department for the NFL for 8 years. So kind of got a wide range of experiences. And I loved all of them. I loved all those different levels of education. So that's probably a little bit of a background. When I got done, it was funny because in my 30th year of public school teaching, they actually were penalizing you on retirement if you went beyond 30 years. They were trying to get rid of the higher paid teachers, the ones at the top of the salary schedule, the older teachers, and bring in new teachers, which I think is always a good idea. But I don't know if I'd have retired. I think I might have still been coaching and teaching. I absolutely loved what I did. And so when we had stopped doing that, we had started speaking already before I retired at a bunch of different places, and it just kind of continued on as a teacher. What we're doing now with Proactive Coaching really is just teaching. And I think all your best coaches are also great teachers. So I think it's just the teaching that has attracted me to this and kept me doing it.
So how'd you get in? Tell us more about what Proactive Coaching does, and more like how you got into that part and doing that work, because I know a lot of people that it's impacted over the years.
Well, thank you. Proactive Coaching is a character-based model for coaching. It's a character-based leadership, character-based training, character-based athletes, character-based cultures, everything we do. And I got started in it. It was, when you first start getting asked to speak at coaching clinics, it's because your teams have done real well and everybody wants to know your secrets. How do you defend this? What do you run against that? And so I was getting invited to some pretty good sized coaching clinics and speaking on technical parts of the game. And I finally was speaking at one down in San Francisco, like 4 or 5 years in a row. Got to know the people that were running it well enough. Then I went into them and said, you know what? I love being here. I'm always honored to be part of your program. But the truth is, and I love the technical parts of the game, but I said, the truth is, I don't think that's where we're winning. I mean, you're having me here because our teams are well, but I don't think that's where we're winning. And they said, talk to us. And I said, I think it's this other stuff we do that's intentionally incorporating character into our coaching styles, into our kids' lives, into the culture of our teams, all those things. And they said, you start talking on that. So that was kind of a reach, Rob. I think it was a reach for them at that time. the only non-X's and O's speakers were sports psych guys. Tom Tutko was one of them. There's Harvey, the baseball guy. Anyway, and so this was really a reach for them. And as soon as I started doing that, it just grew word of mouth. And so everything we've done has been kind of word of mouth. And then after a few years after I retired, I was asked to take a job as an athletic director at an NAI school. And the NAI was starting a program called Champions of Character. And they came to me and said, we've got this concept. We think you've got the content. So they asked if I would come. And so for 8 years, I think it was 8 years, maybe 9 years, Rob Miller and I traveled and spoke on small college campuses. And it was just a delightful time and running into these great people on these small college campuses. We're so thankful you were there. So that also opened up a lot of doors. So it's been a huge blessing. People ask me when I'm retired, I said, I'm only 77 and I don't think I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'll ever retire from something I love. Mm-hmm. And I have pretty much retired from traveling. So all my travel that I do now is either to really long-term clients or based on friendship. And Rob does all the other traveling. So that's pretty much where we started and where we are today.
Yeah. Well, tell me about, I think something that scares people off from being all in on a, whether it's the character-based model with Proactive that you guys do with 3D coaching, is how do you get buy-in to do it across the board? Tell me, when you're working with like athletic departments or large coaching staffs, talk about the process of getting buy-in to the concept of the model.
One of the most attractive things about coaching is the autonomy. There is no one way to do it. And so, I'm not sure you ever get buy-in. I think what you do is you really challenge people on why they do it and why they do it the way they do it. It's one of the questions we ask: why do you coach, and why do you coach the way you coach? And you're not trying to challenge them to upset them. You're just trying to make them really think of why they're doing this. So the autonomy allows for all these different things. And the truth is, I think most coaches start off coaching as they were coached, good or bad. And they stay that way until they're either forced to change, or they're forced to leave, or they kind of go, you know what, there's a better way to do this. Mm-hmm. And so we're not really trying to go in and I think one of the things that sells what we do and is everything we talk about as application. It has immediate application. They should be able to listen to any one of our presentations. I think we have about 16 different presentations. They should be able to listen to any one of those presentations and say, I can take what I learned right there and I can go out to practice today and I can apply it with that athlete, or I can apply it to our whole team culture, or I can apply that into the way I look at mistakes, or whatever it might be. Everything we do is application. And so I think that's attractive. Coaches are application people. They're not philosophical people. I am not a philosophical person. My writing is just real straightforward and simple and concise. I don't even really consider myself a writer. I just write like I talk. And so, evidently it's done okay with that. And I don't know, how do you get buy-in? I think what you do is you realize people, it gives them a better chance for success in every way. I think the way that you coach, if you coach intentionally with character-based principles, I think it gives you a better chance of success in every way, including the scoreboard. And so the fact that so many people have changed their coaching style and then changed their coaching record is I think helpful. And when you talk to coaches about their track record, it's interesting because, if you're talking about high school and college coaches or professional coaches, most people look at their track record and say the track record is a win-loss record. But particularly high school coaches, I don't think your win-loss record is important and it's a factor, but your real track record are the athletes that you work with. And I think that's true for college as well. Professionals, it's a different, we've worked with a lot of professional teams. It's a different atmosphere. Athletes are phenomenal. They're bright. They're invested, but it's a little bit of a mercenary thing. I'll go wherever the most money is. But the high school and college, your track record is really your athletes that you worked with. And are they still in your life? Or are they still in contact with you? Did you go to marriages? Did you, just all the things. If you want to find out what a great coach's track record is, go interview their athletes.
Yeah, well said. Do you think athletes have changed over the last 20 years in terms of how to approach and lead them? Or do you think the principles have stayed the same?
I think everything changes. But I'll take you back to a moment in my life that was really special. I think it was at Fresno Pacific University, and it was a 2-day coaching clinic, and there was a 2-person clinic. And so the other person besides me, hey, are you ready for this, was a John Wooden. And so we alternated.
Say that again in case people didn't hear you.
2-person clinic, and the other speaker was John Wooden.
That's amazing. All right, let's go on.
One of my long distance mentors, people. I mean, you have mentors in life. And long distance one is usually people you watch and admire and you read and you study and that kind of stuff. And I'd had a chance to meet him before, but it's a chance for me to really spend quality time. He was 94 at the time. Absolutely amazing, Rob. Absolutely amazing. We alternated presentations for 2 days. Not a hesitation, not a glitch, not a repeat. He's quoting poetry. He had those young people and those coaches. It was for athletes and coaches. He just had them in the palm of his hand. It was absolutely amazing to watch and listen and be there. But his body was, 94 years old, but his mind was about 36. I mean, he needed help opening his sandwich. He looks over to me. He goes, "Little help. I got you." But anyway,
did he go on quote poetry after that?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the clinic, they were doing a press conference, and I have no idea why they wanted me sitting on the stage while all these people, TV and radio people, were interviewing him. But there were the two of us sitting on the stage. When he's sitting on the stage next to John Wooden, you're kind of like, I wonder what he's going to say. You really don't want to pop off and say, I think I got some answers here. So one of the questions was, how much have kids changed in all your years of coaching? And I'm sitting there thinking, not what I'm going to say. I'm thinking, what is he going to say? And he looked up at him, and with that sparkle in his eyes, he said, you know what? Kids have changed very little. They're all born good. But our society has changed dramatically. And more than any other time that I can remember in my life, we need more people outside the family walking with our kids. And I just thought, I don't need to say a word. Young people are young people. There have been things that have gone on in our society that's caused changes in, the way they're raised, the kinds of experiences they have, the technology that's available. Just there's been a lot of changes in society. But I think I'll agree with the coach. I don't know if I've ever met a young person who wasn't born to be good. They're all born good. And so now it's a matter of what are we going to do as coaches to walk alongside them, to be one of those people outside the family that has that opportunity.
That's really good stuff. We might need to just end the conversation here. Well, that gets to, you've hit on it a few times, I think, in a roundabout way, but a lot of what you're doing comes back to coaches and leaders really having formed a purpose for what they're doing. How can coaches and administrators, especially young ones, develop this purpose?
I think you just got to answer the question, why do I coach? And you've got to really get down to your true why. That book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, applies to coaches so well. And I think it's just a matter of just kind of, I know when I was hiring coaches as an athletic director, that was one of the questions I'd ask them. I mean, why do you coach, and why do you coach the way you coach? I'm not challenging the way you coach, but why, we all have a way that we coach, and I want to know what theirs is. That was one of the questions that I would ask. Another question I would ask was, what would you compromise? What would you compromise, and what would you never compromise? because I wanted to know their boundaries. I wanted to know that kind of sets them up to their purpose. It kind of is like, okay, I will never give in. I'll never compromise on this. Kind of gives you an insight into their purpose. Is their purpose self-serving? Is their purpose service? Is their purpose love of the game? Is their purpose, what is it about that? So, I think that it takes some examination. Like I said, most of us start off coaching as we were coached, and a lot of people start off coaching for the wrong reasons. But I think the ones that have identified why they're doing this really early in their career are the ones that stay in it, and the ones that are doing it without a really strong purpose and a really strong why, and are not intentional about those two things. One of the things we talk about all the time is intentionality with everything we do. Everything you do should be intentional. That means it's well thought out and there's a purpose for it. So I think those people who are purposeful and intentional and caring and all that stuff, those are the ones that they've identified their why. They're going to stay in the profession. They can work their way through those peaks and valleys that every coach is going to have, because their purpose, their foundation is solid.
Yeah, that's well said. And I don't know. I spent a decade coaching before administration, and I couldn't have developed a purpose unless I had some really good people leading me and walking with me. Because at the core of it, I think there is a level of selfishness that brings you into it. If you want to become somebody you admired and be admired, and and you want to win. And I think that's an interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on the values conflict that can come into play between the character-based, holistic coaching approach and winning. Do you see those in ways? Can they conflict, or do you see them going hand in hand?
I think they conflict. Sometimes we'll have I was working with a coach one time who was very, very successful on the scoreboard and was not a relationship-based coach. He was very driven himself. A lot of what he was doing, very honestly, I knew him pretty well. It was pretty much about him. And he really worked at changing because he saw the value of it in the long run. And it happened kind of when one of his favorite players got married and did invite him. And I was invited. He asked me, he said, Coach, did you go to Todd's wedding? And I said, yes. And he said, why wasn't I invited? And I felt like telling him the exact truth, and then I thought, I'm not sure. Why don't you talk to somebody that have the teammates or we can talk about that sometime when we're out, at a camp together or something like that. And anyway, he tried to change and they lost. He started losing more than he was normal, and he attributed to that. So he fell back in that trap of attributing the success to the way that he had done it before. And so the winning thing it's important to win at the competitive level. I think from age 14, on, I think it's important for your kids to experience success. When they experience success, there is easier buy-in and all the character stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
And when you do win and you attribute it back to the way that they behave and the way that they train and the accountability factor and the team culture, when you succeed and you attribute it back to that, they buy in more. And so it becomes even stronger. But I think one of the things that a coach has to do, again, early in their career with forming a philosophy, I've taught some classes to college kids on the principles of coaching and really making them, really think, like we talked about before, who they are, why they do it the way they do it. And I think when you're doing that, it makes you kind of say, how do I define winning? And that was one of the questions I asked. How do you define winning? And the scoreboard is the easiest way to define winning, but the truth is, there's lots of ways to win. And I think if you have a bigger perspective on life and a bigger perspective of the coaching profession and athletics in general, you see there's lots of ways to win. Improvement is winning. Getting together and operating as a great team is winning. Individual kids who go on to success and take some of the character traits and stuff that they learn from you and apply it in the rest of life. That's winning. The scoreboard is important, and it will always be important, but it's not the only way that you measure success. Mm-hmm. And so, if you look at Coach Wooden's pyramid of success, there's competitive greatness in there, and his kids were competitive. But the truth is, there's lots of ways that they put lots of things they built into their winning philosophy.
Yeah, it's something I've really grown to struggle with, because winning is absolutely more fun than losing, and I think winning gives you a better platform. But in my position as an AD now, the most growth I see out of people and teams and coaches is when they lose or they don't get the spot they want. Yeah. And sticking with it and dealing with that adversity, disappointment, and coming out on the other side of it. So it's hard where you want to win, but the most value sometimes comes from the opposite.
I don't lose very well.
Yeah.
I really had to train myself because I knew that about myself, and I needed to train myself to choose my time and place and choose my words. And so I really had to, that was something I had to train myself to do. And I think there's so many people that tie their value to wins and losses in the coaching profession that if you want to stay in it, you've got to broaden your perspective. You've got to widen it. You got to broaden it to the point where your perspective covers a whole lot more than the scoreboard. And like I said, I was fortunate to coach a lot of really great teams, and winning is fun.
So, do you have practical tips of how to broaden that perspective? Because it sounds great as we're talking here. So flipping hard in the moment or in the process of a hard season.
Marry the right spouse. That's what you do. You have people in your inner circle, especially the ones that are closest to you, that can bring you back. I refer to my wife, Dana, who's also a teacher and a coach and just a fabulous woman of God. And she I just call her the voice of reason. And, every time I start losing perspective, she can bring me back. And I had some other coaching friends who could do the same. And I had friends of mine who asked me to do that. Friends of mine who I would say, hey, I'm going to give you a call. I just need a different perspective. And so I think that's one of the things about the coaches and the buy-in and the change. I think so many young coaches don't want to admit they don't know everything. I remember being there. You don't want to admit you don't. But the truth is, if you're really wise and you want to stay in the profession, develop some mentors. Mm-hmm. And like I said, they don't have to be people who are in your life on a day-to-day basis. They can be long distance mentors. They can be, you can surround yourself with people in your circle. But having mentors who've been there before and been successful, who can bring you back to reality, who can look you in the eye and tell you the truth. Okay. I think that is the quickest way to grow.
Mm-hmm. I think the spiritual element really falls in line too. Sports can be a pretty awful god. Did your faith play a pretty big role in how you viewed coaching?
As I aged, it grew more and more. It was more and more my foundation for stuff. And I think that, we work with a lot of coaches who are not believers. And I always say yet, because I think that people are going to see the value of faith in everything they do, not just coaching, but in every single facet of their life.
Yeah, I know for me, that was something that did eventually broaden my perspective. Because you can have an eternal impact on people and lose a ball game. So that matters a little bit more. So let's switch. I want to hear your thoughts on toughness and grit. So I'm a big Tim Elmore fan. I got to hear him speak recently, and he talked about with Generation Z, which I think defined as born in 2000 or later, you have to begin with empathy as a leader in order to get to grit or toughness. So begin with empathy to get to grit. Give me your thoughts on that.
I think he's very accurate there. And I would say, I would extend empathy to trust. And how do you build trust? And it's one of our booklets that I wrote. I've written about anyway. It was one of the booklets that I wrote. It might be the most important one I've written. And it's called The Impact of Trust. And I wrote it because as I was traveling around the country and speaking so many places, you'd come across on the same campus and side-by-side fields. You look at one field and you'd see, whoa, really low trust. And then you look at the other field and go, whoa, really high trust. And it's visible. And so I started thinking, okay, what is the difference? And so I wrote had a bunch of stuff in writing that were just my own thoughts based upon my own experience and what people I had talked to. And then I did something really smart, Rob. I set out, I went to a local high school, and the athletic director there, it's our local high school on our island, and the athletic director there had a captain's council, the representatives from every one of the teams in the school. And I asked him if I could come in and talk to him, and I went in and I talked to him for a little bit, and I gave him a questionnaire. And I said, have you ever had a coach that you trusted? If so, why did you trust them? And then what difference did that trust make in your performance? And then I flipped the question and said, have you ever had a coach you distrusted? If so, why did you distrust them? And what difference did the distrust make in your performance? And oh my goodness, their answers just blew me out of the water. Kids are so clear. They're succinct. They just cut to the chase. They're truth tellers. And I had all these answers, and I came home and I started reading them. And then I thought, oh, this is too good. So I started emailing athletic director friends of mine, high school and college, all the places we've spoken around the country, and said, would you mind asking your athletes these things? And I started going to former athletes, and I got 1,000 responses from one university in Southern California. Anyway, their answers were very consistent. Their answers were extremely consistent on what it does. And in reality, it supported what I had already believed and what I'd already written, but it gave it so much more depth and application on both what allowed them to trust them and why did they distrust them. And so trust was huge. And the three things that I came up with in the booklet, because I'm not somebody who tries to make things complex. Matter of fact, you try to take complex things and make them appear simple. Okay. That's kind of the way I taught, and that's the way I coached, and hopefully that's the way I write. But came up with three things that allow coaches to be trusted. And the number one thing is their competence. And that became how good they were at actually coaching the game and coaching the athletes became more and more important the higher the level of competition. For a 10-year-old, how good the coach wasn't really that important. But for a 16-year-old or 18-year-old or a 23-year-old, how good the coach is allows you to trust them or distrust them, and it's competence. And there's lots of factors that are in that particular category of coaching that allow that there's like 12 different sections in the booklet on that different parts of coaching that I looked at. But the second thing that allowed coaches to be trusted is that they care. And that's the empathy piece. Okay. So the empathy piece for me was you can know all kinds of stuff about the game. You can be really knowledgeable about the game and your ability to teach about it. If you don't care about your kids, you better win every game, and it probably still not going to be enough. If you don't care about the people you're working with, that's the empathy piece. And that opens the door for an awful lot of kids. You have to have all three of these things. The first one was confidence. The second one was care. The third piece was character, their personal character. And that's the one that's probably the most difficult to actually see, because you got to know somebody pretty well. People can fake, but it's the one you can lose the fastest and the one that's hardest to regain, the character piece. And so for me, that was the start of teaching anything that I taught, whether it was work habits, whether it was mental toughness, whether it was accountability, whether it was selflessness. Uh, you know, we have one of our presentations, a booklet's called Life Lessons for Athletes. We identified 10 things that we hope every kid who gets involved in athletics learns from it, the lessons they can learn and apply for their life. And for me, the door opener to that is, do I trust this person who's teaching me this stuff? Mm-hmm. And the trust comes back to competence, care, and character. And you miss on one of those, and it's tough to regain it. It's really, really tough to regain it. So the first step, I think his comment on empathy, I would put in the care category. Yes, that's exactly true. It allows kids to open up to you. One of the things we talk about all the time is every kid you coach has a story. Every kid you coach has a story. Learn it. Take the time to learn that story. That opens the door to, I care about you more than just your athletic ability. And once that door, the kid knows that you care enough to even learn about it, it opens up all kinds of things. That's why he acts this way. Okay, that's why he needs to learn this particular character trait. That's why we need to focus on this. The behavioral changes that need to happen, that explains it. It's easy to see a bad behavior, but you've got to look closer to see, why is that behavior happening? And oftentimes it's their story that opens up that door, which opens up a chance for growth. So when you talk about, when Tim was talking about empathy, I think that's exactly right. We have a process for teaching these character traits. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
Well, that was my follow-up question. I'm especially interested on the care piece. You talked about learning a kid's story. What are some other practical ways coaches can demonstrate care from the research you've done?
You know what? I've got a ton of them in that section of the booklet. Some of them are so simple. The way you greet kids. And I don't mean you got to stand at practice and shake or hug every kid or shake every kid's hand or, but just the look on your face. I worked with a coach one time. I said, a very successful coach, and he came and he said, you know what? We have had all these great players, but we've never made it to the College World Series. And he said, I'm missing something. And we spent 2 days talking about this. And I just basically asked him questions and let him give me, how do you coach? What do you do here? Why do you do it? And after about 2 days, he was actually up here on our island for a retreat. So I was very relaxed. And I said, Coach, do you love your players? And he goes, yeah. And I said, do they know? He goes, probably not. And I said, bingo.
Yeah.
There it is. So we spent the rest of that day talking about small things that you can do to just demonstrate care. And in his case, he was wound so tight. He was so competitive. He's a perfectionist. He has, he has a deep level of care himself. But because he is so intent and intense, I think the kids don't know. So they're careful around him, So I said, you've got to break that. You've got to break that tentativeness down, and you're not going to lose, control or respect or anything by doing this. You're going to gain it. Mm-hmm. We talked about just like greeting kids, and how you greet kids with your eyes. And we've all had teachers when you walk into the room in one teacher's classroom. And they kind of look up and look right back down and do what they're doing without any expression at all. Then you walk into the next teacher's classroom and they look up at you and their eyes light up. They're saying, I'm glad you're here. They don't have to say a word. But the way they greet you with your eyes says, they're glad I'm here. So I'm glad I'm here. And so there's tons of ways that you demonstrate care. One of the ways you demonstrate care is how you deal with kids' mistakes. And especially in a competitive situation, and we have a whole presentation on this, but how you deal with kids' mistakes. And I don't know if you want to go into that or not, but
I'm all ears on anything you want to say.
Okay. So it's
Unless you want to sell some books, then don't give away your secrets. Your call.
No, I'm worried about that. We are mission driven, not money driven. So think what we ask our kids to do. We're constantly asking them to learn new skills, new strategies, new techniques, and as soon as they learn it, we say, okay, do it faster. And so every time we ask them to do that, it requires a certain level of failure. That's being an athlete. It requires failure. Very few kids get anything on the first try. So really, we are constantly asking kids to fail, and it isn't just failure; it's public failure. Hey, would you mind failing in front of 5,000 people here because I'm asking you to do this, and you're not able to do it yet? Okay, so it's public and it's emotional, and so how do we deal with kids' mistakes? And I can give you kind of a short version on this, but it's basically for coaches to learn how to differentiate between the type of mistake it was. And that's not difficult. None of the stuff we teach, I don't think, is difficult. It's challenging, I think, but not, it's not difficult.
Yeah.
So I look at a mistake a kid makes, whether it's in practice or whether it's, away from the field or, what. Anyway, but mainly talking about mistakes athletically. And I look at that kid and I go, okay, was that a mistake made with lack of attention, carelessness, goofing around? Okay, that's a behavioral problem. That's another presentation. That's called the power of your words, how you get kids to change those behaviors. So that's a behavioral problem. And I deal with that totally different. If you look at the mistake and you said that mistake was made at full effort and full attention, that kid was doing everything they could based upon where they are right now at their level of skill to do that the best that they could. And if that's the case, I need to find a way to dignify it. You dignify all mistakes made at full effort and full attention. It's okay to play for this coach and make a mistake. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to make the same mistake again. I do want to get better at this, but I know the mistake's I'm not going to be injured mentally by a mistake I made. Okay. And there's another part of this. There's a bunch of different parts of this, but if you've ever played for a coach that took you out of a game, you made a mistake and they took you out. And I think we've all experienced that. Unless you're just doggone street tough, Rob, it changes the way you play. So if you get yanked out of a game and you make a mistake, without even any words, using some words could be worse even, but just the fact that what you learned is I can't make a mistake and play for this guy. So how do you play? How does the normal athlete play? They play nervously, tentatively, carefully, fearfully. Well, that's not the way I wanted my athletes to compete. I don't care whether I was coaching junior high school girls, I was coaching college men. I did not want my athletes to compete. I wanted my kids to compete fearlessly. I want them on the attack. I want them coming after you. And fearlessly does not mean carelessly. Fearless. I have no fear. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to get back up and I'm going to go at it as hard as I can. I'm going to let that mistake get behind me. And that gets back to mental toughness. The fact that I can get over my mistakes quickly and not let them stay with me. There's a whole lot of parts on that, but that comes back to trust.
Yeah.
So if you want a fearless culture, you must examine the way that you as a coach deal with kids' mistakes.
Yeah, I'm thinking about two things that I'm listening to you. I think it's powerful of distinguishing on the type of mistake. Because lack of effort, lack of focus, yeah, you should get pulled. If it's just a straight up, I screwed that up, it leads to fear. And then the other thing I'm thinking about, and Rob Miller and I were recently talking about this. Have you heard of the book, Do Hard Things, that came out in the last couple of years? They define toughness as an environment for a team or community of psychological safety, just meaning I can screw up, but if I'm following the rules, I'm going to be part of the team still. And then the ability to get better. And that aligns with everything you just said.
Yeah.
You're ahead of these guys.
It all gets back to, for me, almost everything we do, now that I've written that, but that's one of the last ones I've written. It's like, okay, that gets back to trust, doesn't it? That gets back to trust. It's even with your words, even with the words you use. If you're in a low trust environment or culture, You can measure your words as carefully as you want, and somebody's still going to misinterpret them. Okay. They're going to put their own interpretation on. If it's low trust, if it's high trust, you can say the stupidest thing in the whole world, and they'll go, you know what? I know what he really meant because I know what he cares about. And so, even when you don't react really, really well, there's still, the trust is still, there's still a bond there, and it's going to take more than just one mistake to break that trust. So, I really, I really think that fearlessness culture. I wanted my player. When they made a mistake, I didn't even want them looking at me. I can remember playing for a certain coach. And every time I made a mistake, you looked at him because you didn't know what's coming out. He's going to be just screaming at you. And I told my kids, I said, here's the way we play. Here's what our culture says about fearlessness. And here's, as long as you're giving me everything and your teammates everything you've got, I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to dignify any mistakes you make. Don't when you make a mistake, don't get down and get outy about it and make another one. That's a behavioral choice. But the actual, that whole thing of going as hard as you can, and I'm going to dignify that. And I'll say, I don't want you looking at me on the bench when you make a mistake. I want you looking at your teammates and getting back in the game and meeting. Matter of fact, when I had a kid or two that would look at me after a mistake, I would intentionally turn and be talking to an assistant coach, like I didn't see it. And it was a small thing, but there were a couple of kids I had to do that with. And I don't know if it's previous coaching or if it's parents or where that was coming from, but I did not want to be the one that was causing them to lose trust or to lose confidence. And I didn't want them to be the one that was going to get them out of an attack mentality.
I think all this comes back to what we started talking about on the beginning of the conversation of being grounded in purpose and beyond winning, because the emotion of the moment makes us do stupid stuff. And if you're not grounded in it, I've seen wonderful people who care about the right things lose trust in a relationship in one bad moment in a game because they were tied in winning. And that's the hard part of this line of work, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look back at my failures as a coach. It almost always comes with something that happened in an emotional moment with my own words.
Yep.
And I tell coaches, I said, you can't do this job. You can't coach. If you coach for more than a month, you're going to get in your car at the end of practice and you're going to sit down and you're going to say, doggone it, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I could rewind the tape and do that over again. You need to go correct that with that athlete tomorrow. I need to make sure I make that right with them. This is coaching and parenting. They're not professions of perfection. We're going to make mistakes. It's emotional. It's competitive. And so what you try to do is you try to have fewer and fewer times when you wish you could go back and rewind the tape. Mm-hmm. One of my mentor coaches when I was young gave me advice, not just for my athletes, but also for my family. But he said, Coach, I know how competitive you are. I know how seriously you take this. He said, but you need to learn how to detonate your explosives in an unpopulated area.
That's well said.
And I thought, whoa, exactly right. Don't speak when your mind is not functioning. Mm-hmm. Learn how to silence yourself. Learn how to bring yourself down into a peaceful place in the most emotional moments. And he said, I'm sure it isn't just with your athletes that you need to learn to do that. He said, because we had a pretty large family. And he said, you know what? He told me one time, he says, I imagine when you get home, you're still coach. And I said, yeah. And I was probably 25. And I said, yeah. And he goes, your kids, your girls don't need coach. They need dad home. They don't need coach home. Mm-hmm. And here we go back to application. He said, you need to put a little sign in your garage when you pull in. And the sign needs to say, Dad's home. And he said, you need to take whatever's happened that day, whatever emotions you've got, whatever issues you've been facing. And he said, you need to stay in the car until you're dad. And boy, I use that my entire career.
Wow.
It's horrible to do stuff that hurts kids, any kids, but especially your own kids.
Yeah.
They didn't need Coach Brown home. And I'll admit, there are times I sat in that car and was like ringing the steering wheel for like 40 minutes, just like make the transition, especially when I was young. But, yes, we all have those memories of. And I learned that one of the most powerful things, and also how it helps with your trust, is it's okay to apologize.
Yep.
It's okay to apologize to a 14-year-old kid.
That's something a mentor taught me early on. And I joke when I got into administration, it was something I didn't miss about coaching is I wasn't going back at least once a week to somebody saying, hey, my bad. I didn't do that right. And just less emotional environment as an AD where you got a little more space, but certainly don't miss that. Well, I want to, if I didn't have somewhere to be, I'd want to talk for another 2 hours, but we got a ball game I got to get to. We always end with what we call a rapid fire round. Well, I'll ask you just 4 or 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of them.
Okay.
So you ready?
Ready.
So what is the one thing that you want people to know or understand about what we've talked about today?
I just think that this style of coaching allows you to win. Here's something we didn't talk about. I'm writing a new book. It's my last book. Because of my age, I'm doing a lot of last mailbox, last deck, last call, but last book, and it's on coaching for significance. And I'm writing about 4 coaches who I think were coaches of significance, and I'm writing it through the eyes of their players.
Oh, cool.
And it is amazing how these people impacted lives. So
wow.
That's right.
When is that coming out?
I'm done with it. And I've got 2. It's Dick Vermeil, who was one of my long distance mentors who I've had a chance to meet and spend a lot of time with. It's Pat Summitt, who I haven't had a chance to, she's passed away, but I never got a chance to put on one of her long-term assistants is a great friend, a mutual friend of ours. Tim Corbin, the Vanderbilt baseball coach, and Heather Tarr, the University of Washington softball coach. And it's all done. And it's just kind of like, how am I going to do it in 4 different sections? So I'm just kind of thinking about the way I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we didn't follow the rule 30 seconds. We'll do better this one. What is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
Purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
Purpose-driven life.
Do you have a favorite failure that you've learned from?
Well, I think that exposed a lot of failures, so I'm not sure. Here's another book that I give away all the time, that we give away all the time, is Jesus Calling. Okay. And that the daily devotional that grounds you to start your day.
Mm-hmm. Very good. How do you define success in your work now?
The number of people we work with. When I was a coach, it's the number of kids I worked with that stayed in my life and took the things that were teaching through sport and now applied it to their own life as a father, as a teacher, as a business person, and that people that have stayed in my life did that. And now it is the number of coaches that continue to reach out and continue to say, okay, I need more clarification on this, because everything we do, we always say, anytime you have any questions about the content or the application, call us. And so for me right now, it is the number of calls and emails I get from coaches, not just success stories, but people who are struggling. So that's a win.
Gotcha. 2 more. Other than this one, what's your favorite podcast?
Casey J. Cox.
Casey J. Cox.
Casey and his podcast is QB Dadcast.
Okay.
And it's I'm a grandpa now, and it still touches my heart to listen to him and talk to people about, how they became a dad, or what impacted them, or what changes. Or it's coaching. It's the same as coaching.
Yeah,
Rob, it's the exact same thing as coaching. Parenting and coaching are 2 parallel tracks.
Yeah. Cool. I'll check that out. Last one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
At my age, I want to remain curious. I want to remain curious about life, about how I can get better. I want to continue to strive for growth. I don't want to stop growing. And I think curiosity is critical there. So for me, I days of success when I've challenged myself and had to learn something new, or maybe didn't even learn it, but I know that I'm going to keep digging away until I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bruce, this has been really rich. I appreciate it. If people want to learn more from you, is the best place to go your website?
Yeah, they can go to our website, or they can, I can give you my phone number or email address or whatever you want. I'm old. I talk on the phone, so that's what I do. So
okay, cool. I'll get your contact info. I'll put it in the show notes, and people can reach out, or they can go to your website at proactivecoaching.info. And it's pretty easy to buy a book. I bought The Impact of Trust as we were sitting here talking. So
go out tomorrow.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Rob, appreciate what you're doing for the profession and for the individual athletes that those coaches are going to reach.
Cool. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Coaching. We hope today's discussion provided you with insights into understanding and leading. As always, thank you to the 3D Institute and Friends University for their support and passion for empowering leaders. And if you have any questions for today's guest or myself, all our contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in.